Aparigraha is the concept of non-possessiveness, non-grasping or non-greediness. It is one of the virtues in Hinduism and Jainism. Aparigraha is the opposite of aparigraha, and refers to keeping the desire for possessions to what is necessary or important, depending on one's life stage and context. The precept of aparigraha is a self-restraint from the type of greed and avarice where one's own material gain or happiness comes by hurting, killing or destroying other human beings, life forms or nature. Aparigraha is a concept that is related to and in part a motivator of dana, both from givers and receivers' perspective, etymology and meaning. Aparigraha is a combination word in Sanskrit, fused from a and paragraph, as prefix means non in Sanskrit, and aparigraha is thus the opposite of paragraph. The word paragraph means to amass, to crave, to seek, to seize, and to receive or accept material possessions or gifts from others. The word includes in its scope outer worldly possessions as well as inner attachment to material rewards. Rather than doing the right thing or good because it is the right thing or good, aparigraha thus includes the results as well as the intent, in other words the possessions as well as the craving, a sense of possessiveness and hoarding. Aparigraha is the opposite state of existence in thought, words and deeds than paragraha. The virtue of aparigraha means taking what is truly necessary and no more. In Yoga school of Hinduism, this concept of virtue has also been translated as abstaining from accepting gifts, not expecting, asking or accepting inappropriate gifts from any person, and not applying for gifts which are not to be accepted. The concept includes in its scope non-covetousness and non-possessiveness. Taylor states, aparigraha includes the psychological state of letting go and the releasing of control, transgressions, fears, and living a content life unfettered by anxieties. Hinduism. In the Yoga Sutras, aparigraha is listed as the fifth yamas or code of self-restraint, after with ahimsa, satya, asteya, and brahmacharya. Non-violence, non-falsehood, non-stealing, non-cheating, and non-possessiveness are the five yamas. Patanjali, Yoga Sutra 2.30. Aparigraha is thus one of the five essential restraints in Hinduism, that with five essential practices are suggested for right, virtuous, enlightened living. While Yoga Sutras distills the 10 yamas and niyamas, these virtues appear, in various discussions, in Vedic texts. It is part of ethical theory in Hinduism. James Wood states, aparigraha is the virtue of abstaining from appropriating objects because one understands the disadvantages in acquiring them, keeping them, losing them, being attached to them, or in harming them. Patanjali suggests that greed and coveting material wealth increases greed and possessiveness, a cycle that distracts from good reasons for activity that should motivate a person, and ultimately to a state where a person seeks material wealth without effort and by harming, hurting or impoverishing someone else, or some living creature. Yoga Sutras verse 2.39 states, with constancy of aparigraha, a spiritual illumination of the how and why of motives and birth emerges. Patanjali, Yoga Sutra 2.39 Restraint from possessiveness and greed, or aparigraha, leads one away from harmful and injurious greed, refraining from harming others, and towards the spiritual state of good activity and understanding one's motives and origins. The virtue of non-coveting, non-possessing is a means of sadhana, path of spiritual existence. In outer world, aparigraha manifests as non-possessiveness with simple living, while in psychological terms, it is a state of non-attachment, non-craving and one that envelops the sense of contentment. Related terms. The virtue of aparigraha is sometimes referred by other terms such as alobha or agradnu, which all mean, refrain from avarice, avoid accepting and craving for gifts, and restrain from excessive greed. For example, Max Muller translates the first hymn of Upanishad as the precept, do not covet the wealth of any man, the do not covet and do not accept virtue precept also appears in verse 8.1.10 of Srimad Bhagavatam. In Shantiparva and other books of the epic Mahabharata, non-covetousness is described as virtue, that person who, always practicing truth and self-restraint and sincerity and compassion and patience and renunciation, becomes devoted to the study of the Vedas, does not covet what belongs to others, and pursues what is good with a singleness of purpose, succeeds in gaining moksha. One should devote oneself to the practice of all these virtues. The Mahabharata, Shantiparva 12:300. Similarly, in Book 3 Chapter 2 Verse 71 of the Mahabharata, the virtue of alobha is discussed. Book 9, Shalyaparva of the Mahabharata, clarifies that self-earned and proper pursuit of artha is good till it is achieved without sacrificing either dharma or karma. Morality is well practiced by the good. Morality, however, is always afflicted by two things: the desire of profit entertained by those that covet it, and the desire for pleasure cherished by those that are wedded to it. Whoever without afflicting morality and profit, or morality and pleasure, or pleasure and profit, followeth all three, morality, profit and pleasure, always succeeds in obtaining great happiness. The Mahabharata, Shalyaparva, IX 60.17-19 in Vaishnava Dharmasastra, in the concluding chapters of a dialogue between Vishnu and Lakshmi. The concept of non-covetousness is extended to not coveting someone's spouse. The Dharmasastra includes Aparigraha among virtues such as being friendly towards all creatures, being free from wrath, forbearance, being driven by excellence in one's own business, being skilled in related businesses and learning new abilities, being humble before everyone, being positive, being driven by one's duty, among others. Jainism. Aparigraha is one of the virtues in Jainism. It is also one of the 5 vows. Stula Parigraha Paramanvrata, also called Aparigraha and Avrata. This Jain vow is the principle of limiting one's possessions, and limiting one's desires. In Jainism, worldly wealth accumulation is considered as a potential source of rising greed, jealousy, selfishness and desires. Giving up emotional attachments, sensual pleasures and material possession is a means of liberation. In Jain philosophy, eating enough to survive is considered more noble than eating for indulgence. Similarly, all consumption is more appropriate if it is essential to one's survival, and inappropriate if it is a form of hoarding, show-off or for ego. Non-possession and non-attachment are a form of virtue, and these are recommended particularly in later stages of one's life. After ahimsa, aparigraha is the second most important virtue in Jainism, relation to charity and conservation. Some suggest aparigraha implies the concepts of charity and conservation. Taking and wasting more of nature, or from others, is inconsistent with the ethical precept of aparigraha. Scholars suggest aparigraha allies with ideas that inspire environmental and ecological sustainability. Aparigraha suggests the reduction of waste and adds a spiritual dimension to preventing destructive consumption of ecosystems and nature. Difference between asteya and aparigraha. Asteya is the virtue of non-stealing and not wanting to appropriate, or take by force or deceit or exploitation, by deeds or words or thoughts, what is owned by and belongs to someone else. Aparigraha, in contrast, is the virtue of non-possessiveness and non-clinging to one's own property, non-accepting any gifts or particularly improper gifts offered by others, and of non-avarice, non-craving in the motivation of one's deeds, words and thoughts.